Chapter 15, Underfloor Adventure. Omri and Patrick decided they must take turns to sit up all night with Boone. This was going to be tricky because the light showing under the door, but Omri unearthed the lopsided remains of a candle he had made himself from a candle-making kit. We can put it behind the dressing-up crate, then the light won't show. They got into their pajamas, and Patrick was supposed to be sleeping on the folded bed, so they got it ready to avoid arousing suspicion. When Omri's mother came up to kiss them goodnight, they were both in bed, apparently reading. The fact that Omri was reading in the semi-darkness was nothing unusual. She was always at him about it. "Oh, Omri, why don't you switch on your bedside light on? You'll ruin your eyes." "It doesn't work," said Omri promptly. "Yes, it does. Your daddy fixed it this morning. You know, with for what it's worth." "What?" asked Omri impatiently, wishing for more that she would go. "That wretched rat of Gillian's had made a nest under the floor beds and lined it with bits of insulation, gnawed it off of your wires. It's a wonder it didn't electrocute itself." Omri sat up sharply. "Do you mean it's got loose?" His mother gave him a lopsided smile. "Where have you been keeping yourself? It's been gone since last night. Haven't you noticed Gillian frantically looking for it? It seems it has taken up residence under your bed." "Under my bed?" Omri yelled, leaping out as if he dropping to his knees. "It's no use looking for it. I mean, right under the floor. Daddy came in and caught a glimpse of it today. And he had the boards up, but he couldn't catch it, of course. It's a matter of waiting until it comes out for food, and then..." But Omri wasn't listening. "A rat? That was all they needed." "Mom, we've got to get it. We've got to." "Why, are you scared of it, are you?" "Me? Scared of that stupid rat? Of course not. But we've got to catch it," said Omri desperately. He felt furious. How could Gillian have let that stupid thing go? The perils of a rat presented to his little men simply turned his blood cold. And why, of all rooms in this house, should it have chosen his? He was tearing frantically at the edge of the carpet, trying to pull it back, when his mother hiked him onto his feet. "Omri, that carpet and floorboards have been taken up only once today. They've been put back once, and everything is tidied up. Rat or no rat, I am not going through that again tonight. Now get into your bed and go to sleep. But into bed, I said now." And when she used that tone, it was no arguing with her. So Omri got into his bed, was kissed, and watched the light go off and the door close. As soon as her footsteps had faded, he leaped up again, and so did Patrick. "Now we must definitely stay awake all night. Mustn't close our eyes for a moment," said Omri. He was hunting through his ancient collection of book matches just for one out of his father did not cut out the matches. At last he found one, and he lit the candle. He very gently moved Boone's bed out of hiding onto the bedside table, the candle set beside it, and they sat on each side, watching Boone's dreadfully ill-looking face. The pink square of the Band-Aid moved fractionally up and down as he breathed. You could hardly see it. It was like watching a long hand of a clock moving. Only the strongest concentration enabled them to detect any motion at all. "Hadn't we better move the seed box up, too?" whispered Patrick. In that moment, Little Bear had shot Boone. Omri was so angry that he would have fed him to the rat, but now his fury has cooled. He certainly didn't want anything awful to happen to him. "Yes, let's." Between them, they cleared off a spot on the table, lifted the seed box and its longhouse and fireplace and hitching post all up out of reach of the prowling rodent. "Careful, don't frighten the horses." But the horses, however, were getting very used to being carted about. They hardly even looked up from their munching their little piles of grass cuttings. There was no sign of life from the longhouse. There followed a timeless period, just sitting there, silently, with their eyes fixed on Boone's still figure in the flickering candlelight. Omri began to feel light-headed after a bit. The candle flame was fuzzy, and Boone's body seemed to vibrate as he stared at it. At the very back of his mind, something was nagging and nagging. He didn't ask himself what this was, because he was superstitious, feeling that if he let his mind wander for Boone, even for a minute, Boone would slip away into death. It was only if Omri's will and Patrick's were keeping that tiny little fragile heart beating. Suddenly, a thought came to him like a landscape lit up by lightning, flashed to the forefront of Omri's brain. He sat up wide-eyed and opened his breath. And that he held, Patrick! Patrick jumped. He had half fallen asleep. What? The key! I know where it is! Where? Where? It's right under my feet. It must have dropped through the floorboards when Dad opened them. That's where we could find it. Patrick gazed at him in admiration, but also in dismay. How are we going to get it? He whispered. We'll have to take up the carpet first. Maybe Dad didn't nail down all the boards. Moving very quietly, they managed to lift the corner of Omri's bed and kick the back edge of the carpet from underneath it. Another bit was under the bedside leg table, and that was tricky, but they shifted it between them in the end. Carefully, they folded the corner of the carpet back on itself, exposing the boards. Omri then stuck his finger down in the narrow crack of the ends of the board, one after another, testing to see if they could be lifted. Only one of them could. The rest were nailed down, the joists underneath. Making as little noise as possible, he hadn't heard his parents go to bed yet. Omri pried open the short end of the board. A hole about 6 inches by 18 gaped in the light of the candle Patrick was holding. Even when he put the candle down in the hole, they couldn't see very much. We'll have to risk the bedside light, Omri said. They switched it on and carried it on its cord down into the hole. Kneeling on the floor, they peered into the depths. They could make out the dusty lath and plaster of the front of a foot down. The top side of the ceiling of the room below, and the room where Omri's parents were now sitting. We'll have to be dead quiet or they'll hear us. Dead quiet doing what? Asked Patrick. It's not there. You'd see it if it was. It must be under the nailed-down boards, he said despairingly. At that moment, they heard Little Bear calling them, and they stood up. He was standing outside the long house, naked, but for his breechcloth. His hair was hung loose, and his face and chest and arms were all smeared with ashes, and his feet were bare. Little Bear, what are you doing? Asked Omri, aghast at his appearance. Want fire. Want to make dance. Call spirits. Make Boone live. Omri looked at him for a moment and felt an ache in his throat. That reminded him painfully of the babyish days when he used to cry all the time. Days when he thought he would be left behind forever. Little Bear, dancing won't do any good. The spirits won't help. We need a doctor. We need to get the doctor. We need the key. Would you help find it? Little Bear didn't move a muscle. I help. So gently, Omri picked him up, knelt on the floor, put his hand down in the hole. Patrick held the light. Omri opened his hand and let Little Bear stood on it, looking around, the dusty, dark tunnel stretching way under the floor. I think it's somewhere down there, Omri said quietly. On the other side of the wooden wall. You'd have to find a way through, a hole, a crack, or something. We'll give you all the light we can, but it's bound to be awfully dark on the other side. Do you think you can do it? I go, said Little Bear immediately. Right. Start looking for a way through. Little Bear, a tiny, vulnerable figure, strode off through the dust and the darkness. Under the floor, Omri put the lampshade of the bedside lamp and thrust the bulb down into the hole. He couldn't get his head in to watch, but Little Bear went off out of sight almost at once. Is there a way through? He whispered down the tunnel. Yes, came Little Bear's voice. Big hole. I go through. Omri, give light. Omri pushed the light down as far as he possibly could, but the base of the lamp made it stick. Can you see anything? He whispered back as loudly as he dared. There was no answer. He and Patrick knelt there for an age. There wasn't a sound. Then Patrick suddenly said, Did he take his bow and arrows? No, why? What if he meets the rat? Omri had totally forgotten about that stupid rat and all the excitement of realizing what had happened with the key. Now he felt a strange jerk in his chest, as if his heart was hiccuped. He bent his head till his face was in the hole. He could smell the dust. The bright bulb was between him and the place where Little Bear was presumably gone through the hole in the joist to the next section under the floor. There was a hole. What could make a hole right through the joist? Well, what else could but a rat gnawing all day on it? A rat this moment, out on the night prowl, hungry. Rat that hadn't eaten for 24 hours. A pink-eyed, needly-eyed, omnivorous ant. A rat. Giant rat. Little bear, Omri called frantically in the blankness. Come back, come back. Utter silence. He heard something, but it wasn't Little Bear's voice. It was a scuttering of the rodent's hard little hairless feet on the plaster. Little bear! Omri, what, Omri? There was a voice below. What are you doing up there? It was his mother. Then quite distinctively he heard his father's voice. I can hear that blasted rat pattering about overhead. It's probably keeping the boys awake. Ugh. I'd better go up, said his mother, and the door closed below, and they heard them coming up the stairs. Even in this dire prospect, hardly had power to do more than push Omri's desperation a stage farther. He probably would have moved from his place on the floor if Patrick hadn't acted quickly. Quick! Light off! Into bed! He pulled Omri up, snatched the lamp out of his hand, and switched it off. The candle was still down in the hole. Patrick shoved the floorboard roughly back into position and moved the carpet so that it more or less looked covered, if you didn't look closely. Then he pushed Omri onto the bed, covered him up, and the footsteps nearly at the door, and they just flung himself down in the folding bed when the door opened. Omri lay there with his eyes shut, squeezed, thinking, don't put the light on, don't put the light on. Light was coming into the room from the landing, but not enough to see anything much. His mother stood there for what seemed like 100 years, and finally she whispered, Are you boys asleep? Needless to say, they didn't reply. Omri! She tried once more. Then after another 100 years, during which Omri imagined Little Bear being bitten in half by a rat underneath where he was lying, the door closed, again leaving them in darkness. Wait, breathed Patrick. It was torture to wait. That rat had stopped moving, and all the scuffling and footsteps had started. That was something, but now it was quiet again. Omri imagined creeping towards its prey, its pink nose twitching, its albino whiskers trembling hungrily. Oh, how he wished he would have let Little Bear not go down there. Boone's death would at least have not been his fault, but Little Bear, if he was killed, Omri would never forgive himself. At long last, the living room door closed, and both the boys stole out of bed. Patrick reached for the light first and grabbed it. Patrick insisted on checking on Boone before looking for Little Bear. He was still breathing. They rolled back the carpet and lifted the board again. Terrified at each moment they would attract grown-ups below, the homemade candle was burning away in the gloom, like a little torch in a dusted mine, throwing an eerie light down the tunnel. Omri lay down flat, and he didn't dare raise his voice, but he called swiftly, Little Bear, are you there? Come back. You're in terrible danger. Silence. Oh, gosh, why doesn't he come? Omri whispered frenziedly. At that moment, they did hear something. It was a hard to identify sound. It was the rat, all right, but what was it doing? There was no running, just sort of like a tiny shock, as if it made a short, sudden move, like a pounce. Omri's heart was in his mouth. Then the other sounds, as if he had not been used to straining his ears to catch the voices of the little men. He may not have heard it, but he did hear it, and he hoped that hope lifted him off the ground. It was faint, like a scrambling sound, a sound of a small body getting through a hole in a hurry. Omri pushed back the lamp out of the hole and thrust his arm instead with his hand open. Almost at once he felt Little Bear run onto it. Omri closed his fingers, and just as something warm and furry brushed against the back of his hand, he snatched out his arm, grazing his knuckles against the splintery wood. There was something else in his hand, something cold and knobbly, twice as heavy as Little Bear, and he opened his fingers and found both the boys leaned over to look. Sitting there on Omri's palm, filthy and bedraggled, but triumphant, was Little Bear, and he cradled in his arms, trailing cobwebs and red satin ribbon, was the missing key. You've done it! Oh, Little Bear, good for you! Now quick, said Omri. Patrick, get the candle up and put the floor back. We'll find the Red Cross man. Reckless now, and they switched on the top light. Patrick, being as quiet as he could, replaced the floorboard and the carpet, while Omri looked through the figures jumbled up on the biscuit tin. Luckily, the Army medical orderly was still right on top, still holding his precious doctor's bag. Little Bear, meanwhile, stood up beside the pallet bed on which Boone was lying, stared down at him, still clutching his key in his arms. Omri took it from him, thrust the plastic man into the cupboard, and turned the key. He made himself count to 10 while Patrick watched, pop-eyed and scarcely breathing. Then he opened the door. There stood the old friend Tommy, his bag at his feet, rubbing his eyes and frowning around him. His face cleared when he saw Omri. "Well, if it ain't you again, I don't half pick my moments when I drop off to sleep, I must say. Thundering great Minnie was winning over my head. Thought I was a goner." "What's a Minnie?" asked Patrick in a croaky voice. "What? Another one of you?" asked Tommy, gaping. "I must have eaten too much cheese for me dinner." "Shouldn't give us cheese before a big attack. Very hard on the stomach, especially when they're churned up anyways with nerves. What's a Minnie?" "It's our name for a mini woofer. That's one of those big German shells. They make a horrible sound, they do. And even before they land, they sort of whistle. They gets louder and louder, and then kaboom! Then the blokes with my job have to pick up themselves and run as quick as you like where it fell. If it fell in a trench, you take care of the wounded." "We've got a wounded man here we need help with for you to take care of," Omri said quickly. "Oh, yes? The old redskin again, is it?" "No, it's another one." Could you step onto my hand?" Omri lifted him up to where Boone lay, and Tommy knelt down beside him and began a professional examination. "Ooh, he's in a bad way," he said after a few moments. "Could do with a blood transfusion, really. I'd have to have this bandage off and take a look at this wound." He was cutting it off with a miniature pair of scissors as he spoke, and then the bandage up the anxious watcher saw the tuft of tissues was now red with blood, but Tommy said, "Bleeding stopped, that's one good thing." "Was it a bullet?" "An arrow," said Omri, and Little Bear shivered all over. "Oh, yes, of course, I see it now. Well, I'm not much about arrow wounds. Is the head still not in there, is it, I hope?" "No, I pulled it out." Good. "Lucky he missed the heart. Well, I'll see what I can do." He's got a hypodermic needle out of his bag, and for a moment he plunged the needle into Boone's chest, and then he stitched up the wound and filled the dressing and got Little Bear to help him peel off the rest of the old blood-stained Band-Aid. "You a pal of his, are you?" asked the Indian. Little Bear just stared at him, but he didn't deny it. "Then look here. When he wakes up, you start giving him these pills. They're iron, you see? It'll build him up. And these are for pain. And what we have to hope is that there's no infection." "We need penicillin for him," said Patrick, who had once had a bad cut on his foot that turned septic. Tommy looked at him blankly. "Penicillin? What is that?" Omri nudged Patrick. "They didn't discover that at that time," he whispered. "Best thing I possess is a drop of brandy," said Tommy, taking his flask and poured some down the Boone's throat. "Look there," he said cheerfully. "Here, see, he's getting better already with color. He'll open his eyes soon. Wouldn't wonder. Keep him warm, though. That's the ticket. Now, I must be getting back. Waking up, I mean. If there's a Minnie that's landed, I'll be demanded, and it's no mistake." Omri carried him back to the cupboard. "Tommy," he said, what if the Minnie had fallen on you?" "Couldn't have done. Could it? If I would have been having this dream. Would I? I'd be singing with the heavenly choir. Cherubly, hurry up. Shut the door. I can hear him now calling for a stretcher bearer already." Omri smiled gratefully at him. He hated to send him back, but he obviously wanted to go. "Goodbye, Tommy. Thanks, and good luck." And he shut the door. From the other end of the table, Little Bear suddenly called, "Omri, come! Boone eyes! Open eyes! Boone, wake! Boone, wake up!" Omri and Patrick turned, and sure enough, there was Boone, staring up at Little Bear's face. "What happened?" He got out a faint, shaky voice. Nobody liked to tell him, but at last Little Bear had to confess. "I shoot," he said. "What you talk about, you crazy Injun? I asked you what happened in the picture. Did them sailors beat up them redskins and get to where they was aiming to get? Or did the redskins carry off the women and scalp all the men and the dirty low-down savages?" Little Bear drew up his breath. His head, which was hanging low now, snapped up sharply. And to Omri's horror, he started reaching for his knife on his belt. Luckily, it wasn't there, but he jumped to his feet. "Boone, shut mouth! Not insult Indian brave, or Little Bear shoot again. This time kill good, take scalp, hang on pole. Be Boone's scalp too dirty to hang on Indian chief." He snatched his cloak off Boone's body, swirled it proudly around back on his shoulders. Omri was shocked, but Patrick was laughing so hard he could barely hold it in. But he controlled himself enough to wrap up Boone with the cutout blanket to keep him warm. Omri snatched Little Bear up between his fingers and thumb. "Oh, so you're a chief again, are you?" he hissed furiously. "Chiefs ought to know how to keep their tempers. Here." He picked up the broken headdress on the floor and lifted it lopsidedly onto Little Bear's head. "Now, Chief, have a good look at yourself." And he held Little Bear up in the mirror. Little Bear took one look and then hid his face in his hands. "Just to remember what you did to your friend." "Not friend, enemy," muttered Little Bear, but the anger had gone out of him. "Whatever he is, you've got a job to do. Where are those pills? You see to it that he gets them. We can't even see them, so it's up to you. And when Boone is better, do you know what you're going to do? You're going to make him a blood brother." Little Bear shot him a quick look. "Blood brother? What's that? You make little cuts on your wrists, you tie them together so your blood mingles, and after a while you can't be enemies ever again? It's an old Indian custom." Little Bear looked baffled. "Not Indian custom." "I'm sure it is. I've seen it in every film I've seen." "Well, couldn't you do it?" "White man idea, not Indian." "Well, couldn't you do it just this once?" Little Bear was silent and was thinking. Then Omri saw his crafty look, and he knew the old was coming out of the Indian's face. "Good," he said. "Little Bear, give Boone medicine. Make him my brother when strong. And Omri, put plastic in box, make real wife for Little Bear." "Not tonight," said Omri firmly. "We've had enough excitement tonight. You stand guard over Boone. You give him the pills and everything he needs, drinks of water and all that. Tomorrow, if everything's all right, I'll bring your woman to life. That's a promise."